On What's Hot Tonight, will it change the face of transport in India? Joining us, Jagdish Khattar, former head of Maruti, and Jayant Davar, who's the Vice President of ACMA. Mr. Davar, let's get you in first. How are you really viewing, now that finally the unveiling has happened? We have some dates, some numbers, some figures that Shireen just mentioned about. How do you see this really changing the dynamics? A question was posed to Mr. Tata that does he see a reaction from other small auto car makers? How do you see the market panning out?
Well, for one, I think it's a culmination of a dream that a lot of us in the auto component industry had about this particular vehicle. And as I've said earlier as well, I think this is going to generate a new segment altogether in the automobile arena, which is, you've got commercial vehicles, you've got motorcycles, you've got cars. And this is a different breed of vehicle, which I think is still not being added up in the final tally of our AMP plan of having 3 million cars per year by the year 2016. So this is definitely going to boost up the entire industry. It's going to boost up and meet the aspirations of people on the road. And I think, in short, it's a dream come true.
Right, Mr. Davar. At the moment, those are live pictures coming to you from the Parsi Gymkhana where the car is going to be unveiled. We're also waiting very crucially for the announcement of that price. Remember, the actual price of that car is not yet known, and that's been the suspense at this point in time. Let's also hear in the management. Earlier today, Ratan Tata said that he hoped that the launch of the Nano would usher in a new era where every Indian can have access to a car.
We hope that on a day like this, we will usher in a new form of transport. It never was conceived of as being the cheapest car. It was conceived of as being a car that would give the people of India an opportunity to own a car that had not been within their reach before. And I hope that that is what we will achieve. And I hope that we will achieve this bearing in mind that we made a promise and that we have kept that promise.
Any minute, the announcement on the price point. Earlier in the day, Tata Motors Managing Director Ravi Kant said that the demand-supply mismatch could be a bit of a problem for them, but it could be dealt once the Sanand plant is up and running.
Sanand plant we expect it to come into operation by the end of this year, and it is after that that the real capacity will come up. As you know, the capacity of that plant is about 250,000 annualized, which can be taken up to close to 500,000. Yes, sir.
All right, so you heard it from Ravi Kant and Ratan Tata there, and Ratan Tata is expected to make another speech at this grand ceremony later this evening. Those are live pictures that's coming across to you. Mr. Davar, let me begin by also asking you about what kind of impact do you think this is going to have on the auto industry, particularly on different segments of the auto industry, given the fact that this is going to be at an extremely attractive price point?
Well, I think there will be a paradigm shift in many ways. A lot of people have been saying whether it would affect the two-wheeler or the motorcycle market, and I think not, because although price similarities and entry barriers have come down, I think the cost of ownership of a car is definitely different than the cost of ownership of a motorcycle. So I think that segment may not be affected to the degree that one is talking about. I also feel that this has become a challenge for the other car makers, and you will definitely see that the entry barrier into the car segment will drop significantly. This car, for example, is cheaper by the next cheapest car by about 30%. So you will see other cars coming up. You will see a new segment growing. You will see many people on the roads today aspiring and getting the cars that they've always wanted, and of course it will put a pressure on the infrastructure. So I think that's going to be the next element to be seen once these cars sell in large numbers as we go ahead in years.
Right, Mr. Davar, if I can just put a question to you really as far as the consumer is concerned, because we're talking about a significantly long waiting period. It could run into perhaps over 6 months or even into a year or more than that. Now, we understand that Tata Motors, beyond the allotted 1 lakh initially, will actually, if you retain your booking, pay you an interest of about 8.5% for the first year and perhaps 8.75% for 2 years or more. But do you think the Indian consumer at this point in time will really have that sort of patience?
It's difficult for me to answer that question straight up front, but all I want to say is that there is a definite frenzy that one sees in the markets outside in terms of normal people who've been waiting for this dream to culminate, and it has. I think waiting will be an issue. It would mean certain amount of premiums in the market, but over a period of time, I think this is something that will get stabilized to a certain extent. And then, of course, like I said, there would be many other car makers who would possibly introduce small cars or even smaller cars for that matter at lower entry barrier points as we go forward.
Also joining us right now is Mr. Jagdish Khattar. Mr. Khattar, if you can hear me, thank you very much for joining us. Do you reckon, Mr. Khattar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. I was beginning to ask you, will the Nano have the same kind of impact that Maruti had when it was launched 25 years ago?
Oh, yes. I am certain about it.